It's nice. Yeah. If you remember our discussion from last time, we talked about the Solow model and how Robert Solow tried to explain what's happening in the world, heavily influenced by the Second World War and what happened to Japan and Germany and how fast they were catching up during the Reconstruction period. So he had this model that was mainly focused on accumulation of capital and savings. In his eye, in Solow's eye, he compared Japan, United States, Germany, France, and these countries together. And what he saw was that the two countries, Japan and Germany, were devastated. They had no savings, they had no capital, they had no stock of capital, while other countries like France was also kind of devastated. But for example, United States was very rich because of all the capital they have accumulated. So he concluded that the success of a country, the success of a nation in economics will be achieved by saving. So if you can increase saving rates, you'll be more successful nation economically and all of that. Now, another parameter in Solow's model is population, N. If you remember, before we even begin, we just divide everything by L. Population controls L. Yeah. So if you increase the denominator, you would decrease the fraction itself. Population growth would lower the wealth of a nation. Population growth would lead to less tools available for a worker. Therefore, a worker on average would be making less and less and less, and therefore they'll be losing money. Population grows, and thus the size of the labor force increases at a rate of N over time when capital stock is constant. Just before we continue, I have to like my integrity implies that I come back at that question that we laughed at. In Marxian economy, when we talked about Marx saying that only workers there is an issue, and that's I want to tell you about that this theory is coming back now because of globalization. Because of globalization, rich countries are experiencing a stock of capital at the optimal level. What's happening now is that above a certain point, there will be no more investment in rich countries, and capital will constantly move out, while you have constant increase in labor. So due to some weird world-changing situation, this is actually beginning to look less wrong, which is very scary because we can see that real wages are not going up. Like real wages are not going up because capital accumulation is no longer happening like that. It's going out and out and out and out. And it is becoming worrying for many. Like, what do we do? So, but that's a super complicated, like way above my pay grade. But we can see the numbers, and they look like Brother Carl is come back and he's laughing at us right now. So let's see what happens in the next few years. Just had to tell you this. Yep. Suppose population grows and thus the size of the labor force increases at a rate of N over time when the capital stock is kept constant. So remember, in Solow's mind, growth of the economy is because of the growth in growth of the per capita economy, per capita wealth in income is because of the change in the stock of capital per capita. So what is this? That would be your YT. This is your investment minus whatever it's losing. This is the investment. Your savings multiplied by little y. This is your saving rate. How much of this little y you save. So this will be your total savings, which would be equal to total investment. You can rewrite this as S multiplied by the production function divided by L, which is S 0.3. This is how that part came from. Minus whatever is being depreciated. So the change in capital stock would be your investment, your new investment, minus whatever is being depreciated, minus whatever is being lost from increase in population growth. This.
We can't see your screen.
I am sorry about that. Forgot to share my screen. Thanks for telling me. Yeah, I was here. I was talking about this page. Suppose population grows, and as the growth in labor force leads to less capital per worker, capital dilution happens in capital accumulation by this rate. You don't need to prove it. It's just some math. You have to rewrite the whole thing and then say L would become 1 plus n multiplied by n, and like it's just like time being spent on proving something. It's good for you if you can like reach this, because if you're like me, I can't memorize anything. I just have to learn them and just write them on paper again myself. My memory at this point is just theories. Let's just say that. So it's good for you, but you don't need to know about the proof of this part. The other proofs that I'm showing you, they may appear on your exam. So this is the capital dilution. And of course, my calculations here, which I reach this part. Now, if you factor k lowercase kt, you'll get delta kt will be equal to S investment per capita minus plus n this. So what this means is that your capital stock, now that you have population growth, this is a positive term. This means how many new babies are being born. Now that you have population growth, if your saving rate does not increase as much, your capital accumulation rate, which is the only reason nations end up being more richer, will not change, or will even go down. If this is kept constant, if you save at a constant rate and keep having babies and increase your population, therefore your labor force, what happens is that your capital accumulation would go down. So you would be losing a lot of your standard of life. And this was the basic argument that then kind of spilled into actual policy making. When governments introduce child, like, should I say, anti-baby policies, like these policies that, for example, China had one-child policy, or many other countries like Iran. When I was born, because immediately after I was born, the government had this two-child policy that was like, if you have more than 2 kids, you'll be penalized, you'll be like, your tax rates would go up, things like that. And above 4 kids, you have to pay a fine for every additional kid that, if for every additional kid that you want to take identification document for. So that caused some problem for some folks, but on practice, it lowered population growth. And it happened in many other countries, but the most famous was China's one-child policy, which introduced certain fines for having more than one child. So here, yeah, given the population growth rate at n, the depreciation term in the steady state equation is now delta n, which is the depreciated population multiplied by the population growth. This, again, you don't need to prove it at the steady state, but if you want, you need to put these equal to each other. This is the point where this would be equal to this, and then you factor out everything else, cancel them out, divide them with each other, and then you'll reach here. Yeah, depreciated term in the steady state is now delta. In the Solow diagram, the steady state level of the capital labor ratio, K star, is now the intersection. The intersection of the two curves is the point where everything in the two curves would be equal with each other. The investment function and the depreciation line. Excuse me, I think there should be some. These slides, they have so many typos. There should be a plus sign between these two. I have to fix the slides as well. There should be a plus sign if you haven't corrected it on your slides. This is the depreciation term, which is here. In the Solow diagram, this will happen, and this is investment function and the depreciation line. So your capital is not only being depreciated because of depreciation rate, like your equipment will become rusty, they'll need maintenance, you need to fix them, you need to change spare parts and all of that, but also because you have more children, more people are entering the labor force. They need tools too. If you were one mechanic, you could do the same work with one toolbox. But if you hire another mechanic, now, unless you give them 2 toolboxes, they have to share the one toolbox, and therefore that efficiency of the toolbox will go down. Now, in the Solow diagram, the steady state level of the new capital labor ratio, K star, if KT, if you're currently at a lower point than K star, therefore investment is greater than the depreciation line level, so you will be richer. But if you're at a point which is higher than the optimal point of capital per worker, then investment is lower. In the investment will be lower than the depreciated amount, and therefore your KT will fall. So if you're here, this means that you are past the optimal point, therefore you come back. If you're here, you're before the optimal point, therefore you'll go forward. And you'll be here, which is the optimal. If population growth rises, the depreciation and capital dilution line shifts up. The Solow model indicates that in the steady state, higher population growth lowers the level of output per person. The Solow model indicates that in the steady state, higher population growth lowers the level of output per person. This is why countries adopted population control policies. If population growth rises, the depreciation and capital dilution lifts up. The Solow model predicts that higher population growth makes the average person in a country poor. A scatter plot of personal GDP per capita against population growth rate in nearly 100 countries provides support for this proposition. This is a very serious issue with these old models, that they, if you ask me, they sometimes mistake the cause B from A. Like you have A, then you have B, but sometimes you mistakenly may believe that B comes from A before A. So you must always remember what causes what. A causes B, not the opposite. B is not causing A. So countries that have these weirdly high population growth, it is also because they're poor. No rich country, people will wake up one morning and say, you know what, let's just have 10 kids. No, having 10 kids comes from this idea, because there is no health care, many of these kids would die. Like, for example, my great-grandmother, 150 years ago, had around 18 kids, something like that, 12 kids, some really weirdly high number, but half of them died. So my grandmother only had like 6 or 7 siblings. And then she herself had like 7 children. One of them died, and then now nobody is dying, thankfully. No, at least like childbirth is now considered safe and babies are not dying that often, thank you. So it is because of that. People are rational. People respond to the environment around them. No one wants to have like 200 babies who can't be fed. You'll have many babies because you're responding to the world around you. You consider, like family may consider having a child as investment. Whenever they're ready to make that investment, they will make that investment. But like in the Solow model, looks at poor countries that, look, they're poor because their population growth is high. While in fact, this is the opposite. Their population growth is high because they are poor. If they were advanced, if they had like lots of hospitals, if child mortality rate and childbearing mortality rate for women were non-existing, therefore there is no reason to have like 50 children. And in fact, one reason that at this period in the 1950s and 1960s caused population explosion in many countries was that healthcare suddenly went up. Like in Iran, in my country, we suddenly had hospitals in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and lots of these, like we call them mother doctors, like these doctors that are experts for delivering babies and making sure that the pregnant women are fine, like these doctors. So no child was dying at that rate with that super high rate as before. So population exploded suddenly. Population dynamics are very complicated. But in Solo's terms, population growth will lower the accumulation of capital. You can see here, if population growth goes up, this would happen. The country will end up being poorer in the future. Now, you can see here international evidence on the relationship of population growth and income per capita. Countries that are poorer having a much higher population growth rate. But is the population growth rate causing poverty, or is poverty causing population growth rate? This is the more important question. Even that many poor countries have implemented policies to limit population growth. Since starting in 1979, for example, the most famous one is in China, the one-child policy, in which couples with more than one child would be charged penalties, denied access to certain like government-funded subsidy programs, things like that. This lowered fertility rate by over 70%. There are also drawbacks with the one-child policy. For example, I did my own master thesis on retirement decision, and having these super fast drops in fertility rate in 50 years come back to hurt you as a nation. You see, population is not like capital. You can just conjure up capital like by changing saving rate. A population takes time to be produced. Of course, there's a huge debate on immigration, which if immigration can fix it, or if immigration can even cause more problems. I don't know about immigration. What I did my research was on retirement decision. So if you stop having children, fine, you have no children, your accumulation of capital will go up. Nice. Robert Solow says you'll be richer. Good for you. When you're in 50s and in your 50s and in your 60s and you're retiring now, who's going to take your place? Someone needs to go to work to produce or use the toolbox you left to produce. And then that someone also needs to pay taxes towards your pension or pay taxes so that the government can take care of you because you retired. You're no longer in the economy. You're no longer active in the labor force. What are you going to do now? You still need to eat. You still need to consume. You need to travel. Who is going to pay for that? Yes, you paid your debt to the society. I'm not saying that you didn't do anything, but Now that you're out of the labor force, who is going to drive you around? Who's going to produce the grocery that you want to buy if there is no one? So this would cause a problem. Therefore, like many countries are now coming up with new policies, for example, increasing the retirement age or making workplace more accessible for senior citizens so that they can stay in the workplace for like another 10 years. Immigration is one tool to counter this. Of course, it's a super complicated thing. Um, uh, Another one would be to encourage actually having two children. So many of these countries, for example, Iran, they had this two-child policy. They crashed the fertility rate, and at the same time, the government couldn't handle the country properly, couldn't handle the economy especially. So people didn't have that money to even have two children. So people are not having kids at all. If you're a middle-class person, you would expect your children to have certain things to grow up with. You don't want your children to just have some clothes and like run in the farm like your great grandparents. You want your child to be provided with certain services with certain life standard. If the government is causing the economy to go down, and if you can't reach that point, you'll say, you know what, I won't be having kids. I'm not ready to have kids in this situation. So what we are seeing now is that fertility rates are crashing. And now the governments are trying to persuade people to have kids, something that they shouldn't have done the opposite before. They, like 10 years ago, the politicians were all like handing out uh, condoms and everything, like, here, don't have kids, here, people, here, take these are free, these are free. Now again they're back, and this time they're trying to make it illegal to purchase contraception and like these child having prevention. Well, in the first place, you shouldn't have gotten yourself involved in people's private business. What are you doing in people's lives? Why should you even mess up with things that you don't even understand? They messed it up 10 years ago, and now, again, they're trying to mess it up in some other way. So this is a very serious thing when we're talking about child child control policies.
I have a
And
question.
yep, go ahead.
Isn't like a big part of like inflation, like because like the population is increasing, so it's like it's to match the population.
Part of inflation, if you remember the money velocity, like we
Mhm.
talked about, inflation would be the difference between monetary supply of money and output. And population can be interpreted as a source of output. Solo is wrong. If your population is efficient, the population growth will actually make your country richer. When a country is richer, you'll have to meet that extra wealth with extra supply of money. If you don't meet that, or if you can't actually balance that, you'll have inflation. But if population growth in itself causes inflation, it will definitely cause an increase in money supply. Your delta M would go up, money supply would go up compared to last periods. At the same time, if your difference in output, delta Y, doesn't go up at the same rate, you'll have inflation. But I
Mm.
didn't like see direct statements that said population growth will cause inflation. Inflation, at least in economics, it's just a monetary thing. That is what Milton Friedman said. In the long run, at least, it will be a monetary thing. It comes from the government policies and their control over the money supply.
Mhm.
So to understand why economies can experience sustained increases in their standard of living over time, the Solow model need to include growth in productivity. Higher productivity means an upward shift of the investment fund. This is like one of the many issues with the Solow model. It didn't take into account productivity A. It considered all countries to be equal. Well, some countries are full of engineers, entrepreneurs, people who know what they're doing. And some countries, they just moved from an agricultural-based economy towards industrialization. People who have been for thousands of years agrarian, like agricultural farmers, they cannot overnight become on the same level of productivity as, for example, countries like United States or Germany, who have been industrialized for 200 years, like at least 100 years. So you need to take into account total factor productivity. In this way, Solow model puts productivity inside an investment function. The direct effect of higher productivity on output per person is amplified by the additional positive effect from a higher capital labor ratio. So basically, higher productivity will mean higher, more tools available for per person. Capital labor ratios will go up. An increase in productivity would shift investment curve up. Therefore, you'll achieve a higher equilibrium, a higher steady state at which your K star would be higher. Movement of the capital labor ratio and the output per worker over time. See that this is going from here to here. You'll be having a better steady state, a richer steady state point. And of course, the same exists for capital. So we talked about the Solow model, similar production and different saving rates. A higher rate of saving leads to higher levels of capital and output. Increases in productivity are amplified in generating output because there is a direct effect through the production function and an additional positive effect from higher capital labor ratio. Limitations of the Solow model. The model does a poor job explaining sustained increases in the standard of living. Very important here. If you are here, let's say if you're United States, you're very rich, you're above the point of equilibrium, you're the richest country on earth. Therefore, you would not save anymore, like what we saw in the 1980s. Saving rates went down. Therefore, your standard of life would go down and down and down until you reach a steady state. But this didn't happen. Even though United States saving rate crashed significantly, the standard of life in the United States kept rising constantly. Now, you could also say that not for everyone, like real wages have been kind of the same for the last 30, 40 years. That's another argument. But on average, standard of life went up tremendously. and kept rising and rising and rising. And this is the sustained growth. Where is it? Yeah, the sustained increase in the standard of living. This can be explained by Solow model not taking into account a realistic representation of total factor productivity. Total factor productivity, your A, is what your population is bringing into the economy. If you don't have a realistic understanding of the importance of efficiency, your capital stock may stay the same. But if your efficiency of the economy constantly rises and rises and rises, you'll be reaching a higher steady state. You'll have more, you'll have a higher standard of living. Also, the closed economy assumption. What happens in the United States? Saving rate crashed, consumption rose rapidly, but also a lot of money went outside, went to other countries, and came back in terms of return on investment for stockholders. If you own Apple stock, for example, today, you are benefiting from all the investments that Apple made all over the world. A lot of that profits, all those profits that Apple and Microsoft and all these other like huge corporations are making in other countries, in foreign countries, are coming back. A lot of that in terms of dividends on stocks back into the pockets of their stockholders. So yeah, the model does a poor job explaining sustained increases in the standard of living. Productivity growth is the only factor that explains sustained growth in the standards of living, but it is as exogenous as it is an exogenous variable that is not explained. See, productivity growth. Productivity growth doesn't come from the sky. Comes from the schools your government is building, the schools that private sector is building. If your country is richer, people will want to sign their kids up for private schools, for piano lessons, for sports classes, all of that. That will make the population more productive. So if you lower your fertility rate, that's good because you're reducing quantity. But what you are also seeing is an increase, constant increase in quality. That's why, for example, in the United States, a family can have 2, 3 kids, a middle-class family, and those 3 kids will not only not make the country poorer, but also make it richer because of that productivity growth. Because those kids will go to school, those kids will learn things, those kids will be productive members of the economy, will actually add things to the economy. Productivity growth is the only factor that explains sustained growth in the standard of living, but it is an exogenous variable. The productivity growth comes from within the economy. To make the country richer, that country which you made richer will make you more productive, your children more productive. It is an exogenous variable. Unfortunately, in Solow model, this is an exogenous term. It just comes from outside. You don't have an explanation for what causes productivity go up, human capital go up, for example. Gross accounting equation is the aggregate production function in terms of the growth rate of a variable. This is for growth rate. And yeah, we have like a few more slides for growth rate. Let us talk about this on Monday. Let's wrap things up. That's enough for today. If you have any questions, I can stay and we can talk about this. Next time, we are going to quickly finish chapter 6 by talking about the G term or growth model. which is the gross rate, delta y, which is yt plus 1 minus yt divided by yt, and gross rate of everything else. And then we're done with this chapter. And then I will start chapter 7. I will also make you homeworks for chapter 5 and 6, make them available after Monday class, so that you'll have the homework for these 2 chapters. And I'm thinking about having chapter 6, 7, and 8 as part of your second midterm, which we'll be covering next week. Any questions? No? Then have a nice weekend. Take care. See you on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Just double checking. Attendance was all taken today.
No,
right?
no attendance today.
Perfect.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Have a great day.
Do you know? I got an email today about research thing, and I've been looking for a while. Do you know any kind of research things that are happening in the econ department that are available to undergrads?
You got an email for what?
Oh no, this is from the undergraduate research office, but
Yeah.
I was wondering because it just kind of reminded me. I was asking my professor last, like for summer session 1, and she didn't really know of any. But I was wondering maybe if you knew of any kind of research.
Assistantship, like an RA thing?
No, yeah, like just like research assistant or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm working with my own professor right now. He may have something. I'll let him know. So, like, what are you actually looking for? Like you.
I'm just kind of interested in something that has to do with. I'm not really too particular when it comes to economics. Anything is kind of interesting, but I know it's like kind of what I've heard, at least so far, is just that take like a lot of econometric stuff, and you basically have to have all that before you can really do any of the research. So by then you basically have to like be entering into a master's program before you can really do any kind of research. But I was hoping to see like at least if I can kind of get my feet wet and just see if there's any way that I can kind of be involved.
Yeah, that's actually like that's a very good thing that you're interested in that. I'll let
Yeah.
my boss know that if something like he has, I'll let you know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, take care. Have a nice week.
I had a question about attendance yesterday.
Yeah.
I emailed you about it, but you said
Yeah,
you
I
got
saw it. I got
Oh,
it
okay.
right. Yep, you're fine.
Okay, appreciate it.